Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much.
Good morning. It's so good to be together on this beautiful fall morning. It's still fall in Austin. And I'm putting on my Zoom screen so I can see everyone. You can see a little bit of the Zendo this morning, such beautiful sunlight. Today's talk is entitled Make the World Your Altar. And so it'll be a brief talk, and then we actually will, those of us here in the Zendo will take care of a few of the altars and become familiar with them. And I'll be inviting Anne and Kim to assist me in leading that, since you guys have such wonderful experience and I cannot clone myself. And we have so many altars here. And for those of you in the Cloud Zendo, you'll have time to either create or update your altar at home, and then also have some time to share with one another. I'll try not to rustle my paper. Sorry about that. And so we'll begin. The etymology of the word altar, I always want to start from the beginning, is Latin for to burn on a high place, and as in sacrifice. And so clearly the history of the word is so much about sacrificing a goat or something of value to prove one's commitment to the gods, right? To get the gods' favor. But in a non-theistic religion, who do we make offerings to? Deborah Sado Martin, a teacher at Zen West in Eugene, Oregon, says, I cannot tell you if there are beings who receive the scent of incense and come to our aid. We don't know. But I can tell you that to live in the light of an altar is a transformative act for the one who makes the approach. And so that's really what we're doing today, is making the approach and being available for the transformative act of interacting with the altar. In my email that I sent out, I mentioned Trudy Johnston, the newly entrusted teacher in the United Kingdom. And in the talk that she gave with this same title, that was inspired by something I offered, she shared something that I want to share with you because it's so beautiful and it strikes me as so very British. That in her talk about altars last summer, she shared that she grew up believing in fairies, and that she would make altars in the forms of little clothes that she made for the fairies and laid out for them. And in the morning, this is so magical, in the morning, she would find a note of thanks with, as she said, a bunch of kisses on it. So I don't know if that means X's or what exactly, but a note of thanks and gratitude and love from the fairies. And then later she made moss gardens in her windowsill. By comparison, growing up in Oklahoma in an apartment, the closest thing to an altar I made was a complicated, rambling house for my Barbies, which I made from Kleenex boxes, cereal boxes, cardboard oatmeal containers, that's the elevator that takes Barbie up to the next level, and anything else I could find. I spent more time arranging the space than I did actually playing with the dolls. And so we might take a moment to consider, well, what altars have you made and returned to? As a child, when we're sort of naturally interacting with the world in somewhat magical and creative ways. Or later, some altars that came to mind that might have been altars for you or me is your makeup mirror. That was definitely an altar of mine at a certain point. Or your cubicle at work, your workbench, tools, kitchen sink, or your car dashboard. The first home altar that I ever saw, I was visiting a friend's mother, and she was Japanese, and we were picking up a kitten. Her cat had had kittens, and so I got to have one, and the kittens were in her bedroom. And so I noticed in her bedroom on the chest of drawers were 2 black and white photographs and small bowls of water in front of them, and also soy sauce and some flowers. And I want to say even maybe some chopsticks. And I asked her about it, and she said the people in the photographs were her mother and father, and that she made a daily offering to them. This seemed both wacky and incredibly beautiful. And my parents were still alive, so I couldn't really relate to her keeping the relationship with her parents alive through this offering. But there was something about the care of the space that seemed very important. And that was, gosh, in my 20s. So what is an altar? What makes it different from a decorative arrangement of pretty things? For one, an altar is intentional. Each item or detail has a purpose and expresses our aspiration. It has personal meaning to us. And so the altar in the Zendo may not have personal meaning for us individually, though it might, but it definitely has meaning for the Sangha. A Zen altar can be in the Zendo or at home. And at home, you might even have more than one altar. You might have an altar for ancestors, and you might have a personal altar. If you're a family or a couple, you might have a family or couple altar. And then also you might create an altar when someone you care about dies. We definitely had a dog altar in our living room for a number of months after the passing of our 15-year-old dog, Reggie. An altar at home might be in a private part of your house. Sometimes people have their altars in their closet, or it may be in plain sight. Most of all, our altar reminds us of our commitment to sitting practice and our vow to free all beings, including ourselves. And it inspires us. What do you put on an altar? The offerings represent the 4 elements: flowers for earth, candle for fire, water offering, a bowl of water, and incense and incense smoke for air. The Tibetan teacher Thubten Chodron says, or sort of reminds us, that these offerings are based on ancient Indian culture, and the idea that when you had a guest come to your house in ancient India, which also could kind of be like Austin in the summer, it's very hot and dusty, and you offer your guest first something to drink, and then maybe some fragrance, maybe some food, etc. And so there's also this idea of the altar being a place of invitation or preparation for the arrival of a guest, which kind of makes me think of that Rumi poem, The Guest House. And in thinking about altars, I also encountered this quote by Lama Willa Miller. And it's about candlelight. So I'll briefly say that I personally believe that candlelight makes everything better. And in fact, when we had a newborn in our house who cried for hours at dinner time, candlelight was the only way that we got through it, is sitting at the table with a candle, rocking that little baby in his little rocky thing. Lama Willa Miller says, when you meditate, you light up the world with your aspirations. Instead of dismissing the world as a shadowy place beyond your control. A candle symbolizes the incandescence of wisdom or the guiding light of love. It also creates an ambiance of peace. Another thing about altars is they're always changing. They're alive. The flowers die. The water evaporates incredibly quickly. The candles burn down. The incense turns into ash and often creates quite a mess. So an altar is also about care and repair and meeting the inevitable falling apart of things and change. Some other things on your personal altar may be images or quotes that inspire you. And one trick I learned and use in my home altar is when I was head cook or tenzo for residential intensives, we would have a little altar in the kitchen, and we would fill a bowl with uncooked rice, and that's actually what we put the incense in. So there's a little trick that's easier than finding other things. So I mentioned that the English word altar means something burning on high. What do we burn in Zen? Our sense of separateness, our desire for control, our resistance to following our vows and aspirations. All the hate, greed, clinging, aversion, all the things that get in the way of being at ease in the world. Even this world that's on fire and at war. Because I keep remembering we are about finding freedom within suffering, not finding freedom from suffering, right? I remember the first time I entered the Zendo at Austin Zen Center, which was probably almost 20 years ago. The altar there took up an entire wall, and it contained a lot of ornate and foreign-looking and beautiful objects. It was beautiful and also, for some reason, scary. I did not feel able to approach it. I felt very small compared to it. Deborah Sato says, an altar is fundamentally an unhidden truth. The temple altar is what catches the eye when you enter, while at the same time being that which beholds you. So you see it, it also greets you. A gaze with a clear view of the room. It is an orienting presence, like a compass. No matter where you are, entering, exiting, bowing, sitting, or offering, there is never a moment the altar is not still and present. And one wonderful thing about an altar, especially one at home, but also one in the Zendo, is that during times of struggle, it offers an invitation. Take everything off of your altar. Clean it. Start over. Which is also sort of a way of speaking about relationships. Finally, because I just wanted to offer a little bit of orientation towards altars before we actually work with them, Sojin Mel Weitzman, a Zen teacher, was one of the first Americans to train with Shunryu Suzuki Roshi. and he founded Berkeley Zen Center, where he taught until his death in 2021. I was lucky to be taught by his student, Alan Senaki, at the very time that Alan was grieving the death of his teacher, his lifelong teacher. And Alan is himself in his 70s. And so he shared a lot of stories about his teacher, Sojun Mel Weitzman. But the one that stuck with me is this. This was during my chaplaincy training. Alan Senaki was an ongoing teacher. He shared this wisdom from his teacher. I think he first told a story about watching his teacher enter the Zendo at Berkeley Zen Center, and how his teacher would go to the altar, and I'm not sure what words he used, but what comes to my mind is sort of fuss with it, just sort of look at it, but also get in there and tweak things. And I think that Alan once asked him, like, why are you always messing with the altar? And Sojun Mel Weitzman said, by way of explanation, don't treat anyone or anything like an object. That was probably the biggest teaching I got from the 2-year chaplaincy program, is that sentence. And so in the way that Sojun Mel was approaching the altar, it was very intentionally relating with the altar and caring for each object, like using both hands, even though he only maybe needed to use one hand to pick up this, little bowl or whatever, but bringing all of himself the way you do to relationships, or at least the way we aspire to. And so that quote again, don't treat anyone or anything like an object, which also is a way of saying, again, that aspiration of really practicing and feeling the sense of not separate, not two. So ultimately, as the title of this talk invites us, altars train us how to treat ourselves with care, with intention, each other, and the world. With care and attention, and also the knowledge that things will get messy. The flowers will die, the incense will burn away and leave a heap of dust. And we will necessarily need to come and bow and take time to carefully clean it up and restore the altar. So that's the end of the talk portion of our time, but not the end of the Dharma activity. So I think that you have instructions, Marla, to carry on with Zoom folk. Is there anything else that you need from me?
No, I don't. Would you like for me to provide the suggestions for what people do during this time?
Yes.
And are
You'll bring them together, right? So they'll have 15 minutes to work on their altar, and then and you can kind of just sculpt the times. Anyway, just everyone come back here at 1/4 of the hour. And so those of you online now will go tend to your altar, or write about altars, or contemplate any aspect of the talk, and then you'll gather to share online, and then we'll all come together at 1/4 of. Yeah, is there someone else in the Clouds Endo that wants to speak? You guys had the opportunity or the invitation to work on your own personal altar and then also share with someone else. So your experience was a little bit different than ours here in the Zendo, where we just took care of altars, and there were lots of tiny, very full containers of water going about very slowly. What came up for you guys? What did you notice? What did you experience? Rosemarie.
Okay. Well, So I was with Claudine, and we had a very interesting time because we couldn't unmute. So we had a silent uh, connection, which was interesting because for a while we thought, oh well, we can't. And but then my one of my altars is behind me, so I got up and I took each little piece and I brought it up to the screen and I brought it back, and then so I was just showing her, some of the things that I have, and then she did the same. She picked, I think you picked your laptop up, Claudine, because it was not as close. And then her background was blurry, so I had to say in the chat, unblur your background so I can really see. And then it was just, and I said to her in the chat, this is very intimate without our voices. It was different. It was different, and for me, really intimate. And I don't know if we had been talking, if Claudine would not have picked up every little rock that she had painted a little word on, like in her beautiful French, méditer or something like this. I didn't get all of them, but we probably would have been chatting. I mean, about important things, but it was just different. That's all I wanted to say. It was just different and really intimate. So thank you, Marla, for not, not allowing us to unmute.
And Claudine, and then we'll come back to the Zendo.
Yeah, it was funny because it was very intimate moment for me too with Rosemary, and I had the feeling we were not able to talk and hardly able to see what the other one was showing, but in fact the space between us was intimate and a long time preserved space, because we know us for a long time only on screen, but it was a very sacred connection for me. So that was my altar here, not hers, not mine, but the space between us.
So coming back to the Zendo for a moment, kind of any last thoughts, and also, I want to welcome in, sometimes we have resistance to the, fussiness, the sort of grandmotheriness of taking such care of things that are kind of like it already has water in it. And so it's also okay to, it's wonderful to work with all of that, even one's resistance. Yeah, Lindsay.
I've only been to Appamada a few times, and I looked at the calendar today, and I wanted to come today, and I did have some resistance. I think I don't have any previous history with altars or experience. I was like, oh, what might I get out of this? But what might I learn? But I knew it was an opportunity to learn, even if not about altars specifically, but just every time I come here. And now my mind is wide open to all of the potential uses. I think I had an aversion to ritualistic things, and I thought maybe I'm just not a very ritualistic person, but I think as human beings we all are to a certain extent. So it's just about finding a piece that I connect with. So
Thank you, Lindsay. Time-wise, we need to. Oh, Joel has his hand up, but I don't actually see him. Oh, here he is. Okay, Joel, you can finish this up.
Well, okay, I'm not muted. Good. Marla and I talked about things I would put on my altar if I had one, and then I talked about my resistance and what it is that I mentioned something that I saw online the other day, that people sometimes go to libraries just for information or to check out a book or something. But often, and I know this is true for me, people go to libraries as they would go to the Zendo, to go to a place that is orderly and obviously well cared for, and where there's an atmosphere of devotion. And that I admire that so much, and I crave that in my life. But this is my resistance, that I am not really capable of creating that in my personal space. And so I don't feel that I have a space that I can put an altar in. I'm in my office right now. And I was saying to, I mean, other people have heard this before, but I was saying to Marla, you can't see the heaps of papers that I generate every week, and that I feel like I have to reorient my entire life just to clean my desk off. You know, it's just the way my brain works. And I do, that my resistance is to just that thought that I have to reorient my life before I could create a space that would be worthy of having an altar in it. And that's what that's about. I also know that I'm an adult man, and that I can think things, but that's not my default state. You know, that's not the default state of the registration of anxiety in my brain. You know, so anyway, that's what we talked about. Thank you. And Marla had some great things to say that I'm leaving out. I'm sorry, Marla.
I have the same problem as Joel, and I was thinking to do an altar outside in the garden.
That's what, yeah. And I'm so glad, you know, our practice is, in the end, it's really about what are we meeting inside of this very tiny, cramped, and also overly large space in our brains. And it's important to include, you know, some of us may be just naturally ritualistic and believe in fairies, which I so love. I don't personally, but and I'm not sure Trudy does anymore, but also that some of us aren't built that way, and it brings up anxiety, and it's an opportunity to practice. And so I love your idea, Anne, of like, okay, what's a middle way? There's the tidy altar that's like perfect, there's no altar. A middle way would be an altar that's outside, that you know exactly is going to get dirty, it's going to get bird poop on it, it's going to be in the world, and yet you will need to tend to it, but it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. So thank you so much for sharing your morning and playing with altars with me. And I hope that you can carry some of this, including don't treat anyone or anything like an object with you in your week. Thank you.